2 years ago, my husband and I ventured to Boise, Idaho, eager to witness the comedic brilliance of Joe Rogan. Residing in neighboring Utah, we arrived at our designated accommodation with only a cryptic code to guide our entry and an assurance that the homeowner would be absent. As we stepped into the sprawling abode, a sense of unease washed over us. The grandeur of the residence was jarring, and the lack of any discernible welcome disconcerting. Guided by the remnants of an advertisement depicting a nondescript basement room, we descended into the depths of the house. A bathroom adorned the space, offering a glimmer of familiarity amidst the growing disorientation. Settling in, we brushed away our creeping apprehension, assuring ourselves that the imminent comedy show would dispel any lingering doubts. As I prepared for the evening's entertainment, I retreated to the shower's sanctuary. As I emerged, my husband relayed a puzzling message from the host. We had mistakenly occupied the incorrect room and were instructed to relocate upstairs. A chilling question arose: how had he known of our error if he was purportedly away? Undeterred, we ascended to the upper level, commencing a meticulous search for our designated chamber. Several bedrooms revealed themselves, each devoid of any signs of habitation. Only the master bedroom bore the telltale marks of recent occupancy: fresh towels, pristine water bottles, and an unsettling discovery. The owner's personal belongings remained untouched in the drawers and a closet overflowing with clothing and jewelry. Adjoining the master bedroom was an office, a peculiar sight surrounded by bowls of untouched dog food and water. However, no canine companion could be found. Perplexity and unease gnawed at us, but the host's explicit instructions to make ourselves comfortable silenced our doubts. As the evening unfolded and we ventured to the show, the nagging sensation of unease persisted. Boise's vibrant cityscape failed to alleviate our growing disquiet. Returning to the house, we silently acknowledged the eerie emptiness that enveloped the massive structure. The following morning, a discordant symphony pierced the silence. A frantic dog, its presence hitherto unnoticed, raced down the hallway, its barks reverberating through the house. My husband, propelled by a surge of apprehension, flung open the door, only to be met with an unsettling absence. No intruder could be found, leaving us consumed by a shroud of unanswered questions. We resolved to depart the unnerving residence, eager to return to the familiar embrace of our home and children. As we made our preparations, the atmosphere grew increasingly heavy. A deafening crash echoed through the house, shattering the fragile veneer of normalcy we had attempted to maintain. Driven by a primal instinct, my husband rushed towards the source of the commotion. A gruesome sight met his eyes. The master bedroom, once a sanctuary, had transformed into a macabre tableau. Blood, thick and crimson, pooled on the floor, staining the opulent carpet. My husband's cries of horror sent shivers down my spine as I stumbled towards the scene. There, sprawled on the blood-soaked floor, lay the lifeless body of the homeowner. His eyes, once filled with life, now stared blankly, forever frozen in a silent scream. Multiple lacerations marred his flesh, each wound a testament to unimaginable violence. In that moment, the horrifying realization struck us: we had unwittingly become entangled in a nightmare. The host, whose absence had initially puzzled us, had lured us into his sinister trap. The cryptic message, the phantom dog, the unsettling silence, it had all been a carefully orchestrated ruse to conceal his heinous crime. Terror propelled us from the cursed house and into the unforgiving wilderness beyond. As we stumbled through the darkness, the echoes of our screams mingled with the eerie silence of the surrounding forest. We were lost, both physically and emotionally, trapped in a web of twisted fate and brutal violence. Days turned into nights as we wandered aimlessly, consumed by fear and desperation. Hunger gnawed at our bodies, thirst parched our throats, and the unforgiving elements relentlessly battered our battered souls. Our minds, once filled with hope and anticipation, now spiraled into a vortex of despair. In our darkest moments, as the weight of our situation threatened to crush us, a glimmer of hope emerged from an unexpected source. A lone hiker, traversing the desolate trails, stumbled upon our desperate plight. With compassion in his eyes, he offered us sustenance and shelter, providing us with a sanctuary from the horrors we had endured. As we slowly regained our strength, the hiker listened intently to our chilling tale. His eyes widened with disbelief and horror, but he offered unwavering support and guidance. Together, we made our arduous journey back to civilization, where we were met with a mixture of shock, disbelief, and immense relief. The investigation that followed uncovered the twisted truth behind the homeowner's gruesome demise. A deranged individual, consumed by jealousy and rage, had meticulously planned and executed the heinous crime. Our presence in the house had inadvertently disrupted his plans, making us unwitting targets of his murderous intent. Justice eventually prevailed, but the scars of that fateful weekend remained etched deep within our souls. The laughter and joy we had sought in Boise had been replaced by an unyielding darkness that forever haunted our memories. In the aftermath, we sought solace in therapy and the unwavering support of loved ones. Slowly, we began to rebuild our lives, finding strength in the shared trauma and a profound appreciation for the fragility of existence. And so, 2 years later, the memory of our Boise nightmare lingers, a chilling reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface of everyday life. We carry the scars of that fateful weekend as a testament to our resilience and a warning to others of the hidden dangers that can lie in wait. Fury boiled within me as I unlocked the door to my once peaceful abode. The pungent stench of sex and sweat permeated the air, a nauseating reminder of the depravity that had unfolded in my absence. "We found them here," Officer Nilsson's grim voice echoed through the empty hallway. "Two women, providing services to multiple clients." My mind raced, shattered images of my sanctuary violated. I followed the officer into the living room, my gaze falling upon the grotesque evidence of their illicit activities. Pubic hair, like vile strands of straw, was scattered across the carpet. A crumpled plastic bag lay on the floor, its contents spilling out, a grotesque assortment of used condoms, their once pristine latex now smeared with bodily fluids. The sofa was stained with a sickly red hue, its cushions torn as if they had witnessed a violent struggle. Blood spatters dotted the walls, a chilling reminder of the horrors that had transpired within these walls. A surge of rage consumed me. I wanted to hunt down those who had desecrated my home, to exact a bloody retribution. Officer Nielsen tried to calm me, but his words fell on deaf ears. "It's over now," he said, an undercurrent of sympathy in his voice. "We've secured the scene. Your home will be cleaned and disinfected. But for me, the damage was done. The stains on my floor, the smell that clung to the air, would forever remind me of the nightmare I had endured." As the police left, I was left alone with my shattered sense of tranquility. I walked through the empty rooms, the weight of their absence heavy in the silence. But their presence still lingered. I could almost hear the sounds of their laughter, their moans, and their desperate pleas. The memory of their lewd acts gnawed at my mind, a perpetual torment that I couldn't escape. Night fell, casting an oppressive darkness over the house. I tossed and turned in bed, haunted by nightmares that mirrored the horrors I had witnessed. Sleep eluded me, as my thoughts raced, fueled by anger and a thirst for vengeance. In the dead of night, I finally rose from my tortured slumber. My body was trembling, my mind consumed by a primal rage. I donned a pair of gloves and grabbed a knife from the kitchen. With a newfound determination, I stalked through the darkness of the house. I knew they were still here, their presence lingering in the shadows. I opened the door to the living room, the smell of decay hitting me like a physical blow. I scanned the room, my bloodshot eyes darting across the scene. And there they were. Two figures huddled together on the sofa, sleeping soundly. The sight of them filled me with a savage glee. I silently approached them, the knife hidden behind my back. Their slumber was deep, their breathing shallow. As I raised my arm to strike, a glimmer of light caught my eye. On the floor, next to their discarded clothes, lay a wallet. Curiosity overcame me, and I cautiously reached down to retrieve it. I opened it, hoping to find some clue to their identities. But as I looked inside, a chill ran down my spine. The wallet was filled with money, an obscene amount of it. And on the driver's license, a photograph stared back at me, her face eerily familiar. It was my sister. A scream erupted from my throat, a mix of rage, pain, and betrayal. My world shattered before my very eyes. She had done this to me. My sister, my blood, had desecrated my home and used it for her own vile purposes. I lunged at her, the knife glinting in my hand. She woke up with a start, her eyes wide with fear. But before she could speak, I plunged the blade into her stomach. She let out a guttural cry as blood gushed from her wound. Her accomplice, a man with a brutish appearance, jumped to his feet and charged at me. We grappled on the floor, a violent struggle that sent furniture flying. I fought with a ferocity I never knew I possessed. Finally, I managed to overpower him, my knife finding its way into his heart. His body collapsed into a lifeless heap, blood pooling around him. I turned my attention back to my sister, who was lying on the floor, bleeding profusely. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with the same horror that must have haunted mine. "Why?" she whispered, her voice barely a breath. "Why?" I repeated, my voice a hoarse whisper. "How could you do this to me? You violated my home, my sanctuary. You deserve to suffer." I raised the knife again, but something within me hesitated. She was my sister, after all. No matter what she had done, could I really kill her? In that moment of hesitation, she pulled out a gun from her purse. Without warning, she fired, the bullet ripping through my chest. I fell to the floor, my vision blurring as darkness enveloped me. I could hear the sound of police sirens in the distance, but it was too late. And as I slipped away into the abyss, the taste of my own blood mingled with the fetid air that had been my sanctuary, forever tainted by unspeakable horrors. As the blazing embers of Burning Man dwindled into fading embers, Ed and I embarked on our homeward journey, our hearts still pulsating with the rhythm of the ethereal desert experience. Little did we know, our cozy San Francisco abode had undergone a sinister transformation while we danced amidst the ephemeral art installations. Upon our return, an unsettling silence enveloped the house. The familiar scent of Palo Santo had been replaced by a faint, metallic tang. As we stepped inside, our eyes scanned the scene, searching for any sign of disturbance. Our beloved One Direction cutout of Niall Horan, an object of much amusement among our friends, had mysteriously vanished from its perch in the living room, banished to the cold, desolate wasteland of our garage. "Has that always been there?" Ed asked, his voice trembling slightly. I shook my head, my mind racing. "No, it hasn't. It was on the shelf next to the TV." We cautiously made our way through the house, our footsteps echoing through the empty rooms. The refrigerator door swung open as if beckoning us to its eerie contents. Inside, rows of neatly stacked sandwiches had been replaced by a grotesque display of severed fingers and eyeballs, their glassy orbs staring up at us in mute accusation. Overwhelmed by a wave of nausea, I stumbled backward and into the next room. The bed sheets were stained crimson, as if a violent struggle had taken place in the dead of night. A trail of blood led us down the hallway, its sticky residue clinging to our bare feet. In the bathroom, we discovered the gruesome source of the stench that had permeated the house. Our house sitter, the man we had trusted with our home, lay lifeless on the floor, his eyes wide with terror, his body ravaged by a brutal attack. The air was thick with the acrid smell of formaldehyde, as if someone had desperately tried to conceal the horrific deed. Frozen in disbelief, we could only stare at the carnage that had unfolded within our own walls. The realization that our sanctuary had been violated by an unknown assailant filled us with unspeakable horror. As the sun rose, casting a grim glow over the scene, we stumbled out of the house and into the unforgiving streets of San Francisco. The bustling city seemed to mock our newfound terror, its inhabitants oblivious to the nightmare that had befallen us. We spent the next few days in a state of numb shock, our minds racing with questions and our bodies racked with fear. The police, summoned to investigate the murder, were baffled by the lack of evidence and the seemingly random nature of the crime. As we pieced together the puzzle, a chilling realization dawned upon us. The house sitter had been renting out our apartment on Airbnb while we were away, transforming our home into a macabre den of horror. The tenants who had stumbled upon the grisly scene were friends of ours, a cruel twist of fate that made the horror all too real. Haunted by the bloody memory of our invaded home, we decided to sell our beloved apartment and flee San Francisco's suffocating embrace. But the scars of that night would never fully heal, forever etched into the fabric of our nightmares. In the wake of the tragedy, we vowed to never again trust a stranger with the keys to our home. The allure of monetary gain had corrupted our house-sitter, turning him into a ruthless killer. As we packed up our belongings and bid farewell to the city that had once been our sanctuary, we couldn't shake the feeling that the true monster was not the man who had shed blood on our floors, but the greed that had driven him to commit such a heinous act. The East Village. My haven. A vibrant tapestry of life woven into a gritty, bohemian landscape. It was where I found my sanctuary, a charming one-bedroom apartment with exposed brick walls, a leaky faucet, and the scent of Italian cooking wafting in from downstairs. A small refuge from the city's relentless pulse, my home. It was a Friday evening, crisp and cool with the promise of a long-awaited weekend. I'd spent the day lost in the pages of my favorite author, a cup of tea warming my hands, the city's hum a soothing backdrop to my creative reverie. My apartment, usually a haven of peace, was now a canvas of messy inspiration, filled with scattered notebooks and crumpled paper sketches. But tonight I was going out. A friend's birthday was calling, beckoning me into the chaos of the city's nightlife. As I headed out, the apartment, even in its disarray, felt safe, familiar. It held the comforting scent of lavender candles and the whisper of memories etched into the walls. Before leaving, I glanced at the listing on Airbnb. It was my first time renting out the spare room, a small alcove with a comfy bed and a window overlooking the fire escape. The guest, a young woman named Sarah, seemed sweet, her profile picture depicting a shy smile. She had mentioned her love for art and her desire to explore the city, a sentiment I readily sympathized with. Our shared passion for the city, a common thread, had convinced me to take a chance on this new venture. It felt like a safe experiment, a bridge between my solitary life and the bustling world outside. As I left, I envisioned Sarah curled up in the alcove, reading a book, or sketching, perhaps, or simply enjoying the quiet peace of my humble abode. I thought of offering her a cup of tea, sharing a story or two. A brief encounter between two strangers, united by the shared language of art and the city's energy. The evening flew by like a fleeting dream. Birthday cocktails flowed, laughter mixed with the city's pulsating beat. I returned, tired but content, the familiar charm of my apartment awaiting me. But as I turned the key, a strange, unsettling silence hung in the air. A stillness that felt like a heavy blanket smothering any warmth. The scent, my familiar lavender, was overshadowed by a suffocating mix of stale beer and something else, something acrid and pungent that made my stomach churn. The apartment, which had been brimming with my belongings and personal memories, was now a wasteland. My meticulously arranged bookshelves lay in pieces, books scattered like discarded confetti. My art supplies, meticulously organized, were now a chaotic mess, paints spilling across the floor, canvases ripped and thrown in a corner. I moved through the wreckage, my heart pounding, numbness setting in. The disarray extended to the bedroom, a battlefield of torn sheets, crumpled clothes, and broken jewelry. My favorite vintage guitar was lying face down on the floor, its strings severed, a morbid tableau of destruction. But the bathroom. The bathroom was a nightmare. I stood frozen, my stomach twisting, my breath catching in my throat. The walls, once painted a comforting shade of blue, were now a grotesque mural of vomit and feces. Condoms, discarded like trash, lay scattered amidst the carnage. My heart throbbed in my chest, panic rising like a tide. This wasn't just an after-party disaster. This was something else, something primal, something dark. The smell, the sight, the sheer violation of my sanctuary, was a visceral assault, shattering me from the inside out. My vision blurred, my hands shaking. This was my home, my refuge, now reduced to a grotesque parody of itself. I called Airbnb, my voice trembling, the words choked with disbelief and rage. The customer service representative, a calming voice on the other end, offered condolences and assurances. They would investigate, they said, they would take care of the damages. But as I cleaned, scrubbed, and threw away, the realization settled on me like a cold, heavy stone. The physical mess was a mere symptom, an outward manifestation of a far deeper, more disturbing violation. Sarah's sweet smile, her artistic aspirations, seemed like a carefully crafted facade. Her presence, a subtle, insidious intrusion into my intimate space, felt like a sinister plot unfolding, a carefully orchestrated act of destruction. The apartment, the familiar scent, the reassuring presence of my things, had been meticulously erased, replaced with a chillingly alien presence. The days that followed were a blur of cleaning, repair, and agonizing uncertainty. The Airbnb representative, though sympathetic, seemed curiously vague about Sarah's whereabouts, her future bookings, her story. It was unsettling, this quiet but persistent silence. As I replaced the torn curtains, reorganized my bookshelves, the echoes of Sarah's silence continued to haunt me. The apartment, meticulously restored, still felt flawed. There was an undercurrent of tension, a persistent sense of unease that lingered in the air, a silent echo of the nightmare that had transpired. And as I sat on my couch, sipping tea, the city's hum no longer a soothing soundtrack, but a noisy reminder of vulnerability, I wrestled with a disturbing question. Was this just an isolated incident, a freak occurrence, a random act of cruelty? Or was there something deeper, something darker at play? A shadow lurking in the heart of my city, ready to pounce, ready to steal the sanctity of home? Every time I saw another Airbnb advert, a flicker of fear danced in the back of my mind. The city, my sanctuary, had become tinged with a new and unsettling feeling. The thought of opening my home to a stranger, offering trust and privacy, had become a terrifying proposition. The comforting familiarity of my apartment, a place of refuge, now felt vulnerable, a fragile tapestry hanging by a thread. The East Village, my haven, my muse, had become a constant source of disquiet, the familiar landscape tainted with the memory of that bleak Friday night. The city, with its energy and its promise, now also held a disconcerting undercurrent of fear, a reminder of the fragility of trust and the darkness that lurks just beyond the bustling streets. And Sarah? Sarah still remained a ghost, a silent, shadowy figure in the tapestry of my life, a reminder of the night the East Village turned into a nightmare. Her story, however, was far from over. A year later, I received an anonymous package, a simple brown envelope addressed to me. Inside, along with a crumpled photo of Sarah, was a single note. "We are always watching. And we are always hungry." A shiver ran through me, a frigid wave of fear that sent chills down my spine. The phone's silent hum, the city's constant murmur, now sounded like a sinister whisper, a coded message of impending danger. The East Village, my haven, now felt like a stage for a chilling game. The city's pulse, my once comforting heartbeat, now seemed to throb with a sinister rhythm. And in the shadows of my apartment, the memory of that abject night continued to linger, a constant reminder of a darkness that lurked just beyond the city's bright lights. The nightmare was far from over. The flickering neon sign of the Seagull's Nest Motel shone against the midnight sky, casting long, distorted shadows across the cracked asphalt parking lot. I was a mess. My hair was plastered to my forehead, my clothes felt miles too big, and my eyes, well, my eyes hadn't stopped watering since that phone call. It was the phone call that had flipped my perfectly planned vacation upside down, turning it into a nightmare that I now felt spiraling out of control. It had started so innocently. I'd been scrolling through Airbnb, the familiar anticipation bubbling in my stomach as I saw the listing for a charming beach house in Cape Cod. The photos showcased pristine white walls, weathered wooden floors, and a deck overlooking a private beach. It looked like something out of a magazine. The price, a little steep, but manageable, was listed as $150 per night for the week, with a 50% down payment required to secure the booking. I contacted the host, a woman named Evelyn who had a warm, welcoming voice and sounded genuinely excited about her charming little property. We finalized the details, agreed on the dates, July 1st to 7th, and I made the initial payment. Everything felt right, like destiny had intervened, offering me a much-needed escape from the monotony of city life. The week flew by in a blur of packing and last-minute errands. I imagined myself walking along the sandy beach, the salty air filling my lungs, the sun warming my face. It was almost time. Then came the phone call. Evelyn's voice, which had once been bubbling with enthusiasm, was now laced with a cold, clipped edge. "There's been a misunderstanding," she said, her words like icy daggers piercing through my anticipation. "The price for the week is actually $450 per night, not $150. My blood ran cold. It couldn't be right. I was sure I had seen the right price, but something in her voice made my heart pound a frantic rhythm against my ribs. "But that's triple the amount," I stammered, struggling to make sense of the situation. "We already agreed on the price. I even paid the initial deposit." Evelyn's voice didn't waver. "That's not my problem. The price was a mistake, a glitch in the system. I don't know how it happened. If you want to stay, you have to pay the full amount, or I have to cancel the booking." My mind raced, desperately searching for a solution. The thought of losing my dream vacation, the money I'd already spent, the disappointment that washed over me like a tidal wave, was almost unbearable. "Is there anything Airbnb can do?" I pleaded. "Airbnb can't do anything," Evelyn coldly replied. "It was a private booking. They don't have any jurisdiction. You can either pay the full amount or—" A pause, a brittle laugh, then a final, chilling sentence: "I'll have to find another guest." The click of the line echoed in my ears, a cruel mockery of the calm and serene sounds of the beach house I'd envisioned. Panic seized me. I tried calling Airbnb, frantically explaining my situation. The agent on the line, though sympathetic, was powerless. Because it was a private booking, they couldn't intervene. It was a classic buyer beware scenario. My options were bleak. Pay the tripled price, which I couldn't afford, or lose my vacation and my money. I felt helpless, trapped in a web of lies and fear. I spent the next few days in a haze of despair and confusion. I frantically searched for alternative accommodations, but everything was booked, prices skyrocketing thanks to the peak season. The fear was growing, a gnawing sensation that refused to be appeased. It was the fear of being alone. Alone in a situation I didn't understand, with a host who seemed to be playing some macabre game. What did Evelyn have to gain from this sudden price jump? As I scrolled through photos of alternative accommodations, my eyes fell on a listing for a cozy little motel on the outskirts of Cape Cod. The website promised charm, a friendly atmosphere, and a secluded location. It was a far cry from the beach house I had dreamt of, but it was something, and the cost was reasonable. I booked it, paid in full, and immediately felt a sense of relief, a tiny sliver of hope amidst the darkness. The drive to the motel was long and bleak, a dark gray ribbon that snaked its way through the desolate landscape. The closer I got, the more uneasy I felt. My gut was churning with a growing fear that I couldn't explain. The motel was exactly as the website described, a tired and dusty two-story building with a dated neon sign that blinked erratically. The parking lot was almost empty, and the only sound was the mournful creaking of the rusty swing set in the overgrown backyard. As I walked towards the front door, a strange sensation washed over me, a prickling chill that ran down my spine. A faint scent, a mix of mildew and decaying seaweed lingered in the air, making my throat feel like it was constricting. The lobby was dark, lit only by a single flickering fluorescent bulb that cast long, menacing shadows on the scuffed wooden floor. A dusty bell jingled as I pushed open the door, the sound echoing eerily in the silence. An old woman sat behind the counter, her face hidden in the darkness. She didn't look up as I approached. Her eyes, when she finally did meet my gaze, were like two black marbles, cold and emotionless. "I have a reservation," I said, trying to maintain my composure, but my voice trembled despite my best efforts. "Room 13, she rasped, her voice as dry and brittle as the air itself. "You'll find the key on the table by the door." The room was small, claustrophobic, and reeking of stale air. The furniture, covered in a faded floral print, looked decades old. The single window, chipped and cracked, offered a view of the parking lot and the dark, looming woods beyond. An overwhelming sense of dread enveloped me. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that something was wrong, terribly wrong. As I unpacked, a strange throbbing began in my ears, a low, constant hum that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. The air grew thick and heavy, as if the very walls were breathing. I tried to ignore it, to convince myself it was nothing but my imagination. I went to the window, hoping for a breath of fresh air, but as soon as I looked out I saw it. Standing in the shadows of the woods, silhouetted against the twilight sky, I saw a figure. Tall, thin, with long, spindly limbs, it moved with an unnerving smoothness, almost gliding across the ground. Its face was hidden in the darkness, but I could sense its gaze, cold and unblinking, fixed on me. Terror froze me in my tracks. I stumbled back, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. The figure started to move towards me, its limbs extending like the branches of a gnarled, ancient tree. Suddenly, the throbbing in my ears intensified, a deafening roar that filled my head. A wave of dizziness and nausea washed over me, and I felt myself collapsing, my vision blurring, everything fading to black. When I woke, I was lying on the bed, the throbbing in my ears had subsided, replaced by a throbbing pain in my head. The room was dark, the only light filtering in from the parking lot. I felt groggy, disoriented, as if I had been drugged. I tried to remember what had happened, but my mind felt like a fog. The figure, the throbbing, the feeling of being watched, it all felt like a nightmare. As I sat up, I saw a note on the nightstand. Written in neat, angular handwriting, it read, "Welcome to your new home." A chill ran down my spine. The note was not addressed to me, it was addressed to guests, a collective, impersonal greeting. It sent a shiver through my entire body. As I tried to make sense of the situation, a flicker of movement caught my eye in the mirror. The reflection was distorted, warped by the age of the mirror, making it difficult to discern what exactly I was seeing. I approached the mirror, drawn by a morbid curiosity, and gasped. There was someone behind me, standing silently in the shadows. Their form was elongated, distorted, and the darkness hid their face. The fear I had felt before was nothing compared to the raw, primal terror that now consumed me. I was trapped in a nightmare with no escape. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. I tried to run, but my legs, heavy and uncooperative, wouldn't move. My fear was so intense, so overwhelming that it consumed every fiber of my being. The figure in the mirror stepped closer, its pale face, devoid of any expression, peering at me from the darkness. It reached out, its hands stretching towards me, long and bony, its pale fingers like the claws of some unseen beast. It whispered a single word, a sound so low and raspy that it seemed to come from within my own skull. "Welcome." The figure's cold, lifeless eyes locked onto mine. And as I stared back, my fear transforming into a chilling acceptance of my fate, I realized I was not alone. This was not a vacation, it was a nightmare that had just begun.